we'll start the recording now. So hopefully everybody's had a good time in DSKUS 2023. Hopefully all your projects turned out to be interesting and you guys learned some things. So we're excited to hear about what you guys came across and what kinds of solutions you guys came up with. And of course, like I mentioned, we're going to share these with the U.S. Embassy. And last year they were shared with the U.S. State Department as well. So I don't know if any of them got implemented or anything, but at least it's interesting that somebody is reading your guys' proposals. Whether they actually do anything with it or not, who knows? That's the government, but whatever. So let's start with group number one. If you guys want to queue yourselves up and here, let me change it. Okay, you should be able to share your screen now. So if you guys want to share your screen, one member.
Okay, I'm start sharing my screen.
Go for it.
Oh, can you guys see my screen?
We can't see your screen. So hopefully you guys have practiced and you have like a sort of a plan for doing this, but whenever you're ready, you can start. I will start my timer on my end and you can do your presentation, and then you might ask a couple questions at the end if anybody has any, but otherwise that's the plan. Okay.
Sure.
So start whenever you're ready.
Right. So Hyunji, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, we are Group 1 who will present the topic of pathways to a sustainable future, forecasting renewable energy demand, CO2 emissions, and climate change impacts. Climate change and energy are serious problems that directly affect our lives. In our literature review, we have determined the accurate forecasting of CO2 emissions plays an important role in preparing countermeasures against climate change. Therefore, we will propose related policies through the future CO2 emission forecasting models.
Our comprehensive data sets of various socioeconomic attributes from population dynamic to economic indicators countrywide. These data sets source from reliable platforms such as World Data Bank, Kaggle, Trade and Economic, All Data, and the UN and the IE organizations. So we apply dynamic time warping in our time series cluster as a robust distance measure. DTW allows us to accurately group data with similar shapes even when they are out of phase or exhibit variant speeds. This enhances our clustering precision for insightful analysis. So the features, our data spanning from 1996 to 2021 includes 11 crucial features. Global indicators such as wildfire and S&P 500 price provide economic backdrop, while the remaining features offer country-specific dynamic. The data frame below outlines these features with arrow distinguishing between social and economic variables. The arrangement allows you to analyze the impact of these different factor types across various countries. So starting with data collection, we clean and aggregate the data management missing values with backward and forward filling. Next, we select our countries of interest, moving to model training using advanced regression technique. The final step is the integrated dashboard, creating feature and dynamic predictive tools and adjustable attribute sliders for the intuitive data exploration and prediction generation. Through dynamic time warping, we identify 4 distinct country clusters ranging from developed nation cluster 1 to those with present development and needs cluster 4. This finding paves the way for nuanced policymaking and intervention strategies. Our analysis reveals that population size overwhelmingly drives CO2 emissions, notably in Canada, China, Czech Republic, Kazakhstan, Korea, Trinidad, and the US. However, for Luxembourg and Mongolia, Russia, economic factors like GDP and inflation are pivotal. This highlights the need for tailored country-specific strategy in managing and reducing CO2 emissions. When we look at the sharp values, they aid us in understanding the impact of variables on our model's prediction, considered to dependence for side by side. For South Korea, it's evident that population over 50 million, life expectancy above 80 adds significant positive contributions to CO2 emission, as much as 30 million metric tons. And for Luxembourg, we observe between 450 to 550K population, there is a positive sharp value indicating increased emission. China showing a relation between urban and total population. Remember, these sharp values don't show proportional emission changes, but offer a glimpse into the intricate dynamic behind CO2 emissions.
This contrasting insight underscores the diverse roles different factors play in shaping CO2 emissions across countries. And then we focused on United States and Korea to identify each country's dependence on energy based on 10 different energy-related features, predicting CO2 emissions and suggesting the direction of policy. The above-mentioned features are as follows. all data from 1990 to 2021. In addition to renewable and non-renewable energy, data called policies were added, which was environmental policy data from Korea and United States, and a feature was formed by counting based on the annual implementation. The output of multivariate linear regression model, which receives these features and biases input, is shown as respectively. Considering the features have different scales, all values have been normalized, and within the scale range, CO2 emissions continue to increase in Korea, and on the contrary, they tend to decrease in the United States. So the coefficient of the feature that affects CO2 emissions that we are going to looking at is as follows. In the case of Korea, it has high positive weight in total, coal and gas, and a low negative weight in renewable energy. Therefore, Korea needs policies to promote the introduction of renewable energy while reducing its dependence on fossil fuels overall. In the United States, coals account for the largest weight, but in terms of renewable energies, they account for the largest negative weight in geographic biomass and solar generation, so the model tend to be decreased. As the future that greatly affects CO2 reduction, this expansion of renewable energy will be a policy to correspond to climate change. One noticeable thing is that the weight sign of two predictive models are reversed for solar generation. In Korea, the increase in solar power generation increases CO2 emissions, so it is necessary to expand the development and distribution of solar power systems and strengthen incentives and support policies for solar power generation. On the other hand, in the United States, solar generation reduces CO2 emissions, so we need to further promote or expand solar power policies and continue efforts for sustainable energy transformation. Government can encourage the installation of photovoltaic systems and promote support policies for technology development.
So this is one of our two final products. So you can select the different countries and you can reset the buttons, and there is a slider showing the different attributes. And based on the attributes, it will do a live prediction of CO2 emissions. So see, you can, if you increase the fertility, the CO2 emission will increase. This is for United States. And this is our next dashboard showing the cluster of each country based on their socioeconomic trends. And right below it, you can select the different cluster and each attribute, and it will show a trend line of each country. And you can also even select multiple country and compare their trend lines over time. So in conclusion, regression models show population fertility as key driver of CO2 emissions for both the United States and South Korea. The US slowly growing population suggests continued emission pressure, while South Korea's declining population and low fertility rate hint at potential emission reduction. The insight underline the vital role demographic factors play in shaping our sustainability strategies. So these are the tools that we use: Plotly, Python, scikit-learn libraries, and the TSLearn library for time series clustering. And thank you, everyone.
All right. Very nice, guys. Good job. I like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Does anybody have any questions? I know it's early for you guys in Korea and probably late for you guys in the United States. Anybody have any questions about their presentation? Question or two. Not, I will ask a question. It's always nice to ask a question. Something I was curious about with you guys was that the solar generation stuff. That was weird. Do you have any ideas why it's opposite in Korea and the United States?
Hyunji?
Because our model said that the CO2 emission will tend to be decreased after applying some policies about some introduction of renewable energy in Korea, but in the United States they already have many renewable energy sources, so it might be efficient to expand some renewable energy sources. So there might be some difference between two countries.
Yeah, I was wondering too. Like, I wonder if Korea manufactures a lot of the solar panels. They don't use a lot of them, and so if you're manufacturing, that might actually increase the coal emissions or CO2 emissions. It's an interesting. That was actually really interesting little result you guys found. It's not what you would expect. So. Cool. Anyway, well, good job. Very nice. I thought that was very nice. Also, Queen can talk very fast in English, so that was impressive. Good job. So, group two, do you want to share your slides and take over? Okay, whenever you're ready.
Hello, we are team two, and the members are Jun, Eugene, Swati, and Corey. Our topic is political instability caused by climate change. We are focusing on how climate change affects food security or food supply in specific, and how that in turn affects the political stability. Some of the factors are temperature, precipitation, sea level increase, and crop production. So we used inputs like temperature, mean sea level increase, crop production, political stability, and did some basic analysis, feature engineering, and modeling, so that we can share our insights on what we found. Some of the data sets we used were collected from sources like World Guidance Index, IMF Climate Change Dashboard, and FOA. And we found data on temperature, mean sea level rises, and other specific factors that we mentioned. In our analysis, we observed that there is a general increase in the surface temperature over the years in most of the countries, and some of these specific countries are plotted in the graph here. There has been over the years an increase in general. And political stability, there has been a decline in political stability over the years. We can see from the first plot that the top 10% seem to have pretty low score in the political stability. And from the second and third plot, we can see that the political stability has been dropping quite significantly. And looking at food supply, over the years, there's been an increase in the crop production. There's been a significant increase of about 30%, which is quite a lot. And we observed that most of the countries had a mean sea level increase as well. And we did some feature engineering to map bodies of the water to individual countries. And we found out the countries that are listed here had some significant increases, and these 10 seas were had the highest increase. And overall, across all the bodies, water bodies, there was increase in sea level over the years from 1996 to 2022. Before we moved on to our modeling, we did some feature engineering to help with that. We removed some of the countries that do not exist in our timeline anymore. And we combined the data sets based on the countries that we decided to proceed with, and we aggregated the data to make sure that we can do the modeling. And initially, we had 202 countries and data for years from 1961 to 2022. And once we aggregated it and found the common countries and the important countries, we had 136 countries from years 1996 to 2018.
Looking at the change in the average political stability from 1996 to 2018, we can see that it has decreased sharply in recent years. In particular, geopolitical reasons such as the US war are related to the sharp decline in 2003. Changes in political stability were visualized in color on the map. As time goes by, it shows that the color of more countries becomes darker and the political stability decreases. As a result of removing missing data and checking the average temperature of 136 countries on a graph, we can see that the temperature rose significantly in 2018 and 2020. As shown in the video below, we plotted the change in temperature by year on the map to recognize easily. This heat map shows the correlation between surface temperature data and food supply data by year. Although it seems to show a cycle at regular intervals, the color generally brightens over time and the correlation tends to increase. Since we checked the correlation between temperature and food supply, we modeled a regression. And by adding political stability data, we did feature selection through filter methods. Finally, we obtained political stability with rice, potato, barley, maize, and temperature change features to predict political stability. Next, we modeled the correlation between the yield and political stability. Barley and wheat generally show a significant correlation of about 0.5 or more, and maize and potato also show a steady correlation with political stability. At first, we expected to look at the association with food security through climate change such as temperature, precipitation, and sea level, and then look at the impact of this correlation on political stability, absence of violence, and terrorism. However, in fact, we had to consider some more things like extreme climate events, migration, ethnic diversity, level of corruption, etc. We confirmed that climate change affects a number of other factors until it eventually changes political stability. The deliverables of our project are largely divided into data and an integrated framework. First, we formed an integrated framework. It provides an initial foundation for our teams to conduct further research in the future on the issues of climate change and political stability, and we also got an organized data set. We cleaned 6 raw data sets to select a meaningful country list. In addition, the data pre-processing and analysis process was recorded in column notebooks to enable further analysis. Thank you.
Okay, very good, very nice. So I'll clap for you if nobody else claps for you. So good job. Does anybody have any questions? You know, we have time for one question here. Did anybody see anything that we're interested in, confused about? No, nobody's excited. All right, I will ask one question then. Something that I was intrigued by is in your guys' data set, you know, you keep mentioning political stability, but do you know how that variable in your data was actually measured? What was that? What was political stability? What was it based on, that target variable that you had? Do you know?
That came from the World Governance Organization, and their calculation is a bit muddied in terms of what they calculate, but they have a number of other attributes that play into it. So it's the stability of economic functions, the absence of violence, terrorism, and probably using murder rates and whatnot. Yeah. So I have to dig into the details to get more on all the sources that they aggregated for it, but it was pretty extensive.
Yeah, okay, it's interesting. Yeah, I was curious when you're mentioning all the connections to it. I was like, I wonder how it was measured exactly. But okay, very cool. All right, well, very interesting. I thought that was a pretty interesting project and kind of found some interesting results there as well. So very good job. So I'll clap you guys once again. So why don't we move on then to group number 3? If you guys want to share your slides, reset my timer here. Okay, whenever you guys are ready, you can take it away. Or start, I suppose.
start.
Yep, just please start.
Hello everyone, we're DSKUS Team 3 Andrea, Hyunji, William, and Yeso. And we're gonna now start our final presentation. So our topic for this project is disinformation campaigns, particularly related to social media use in different countries, such as authoritarian states like Russia or China. So comparison study was done between authoritarian and non-authoritarian countries. According to our literature review, fake news or disinformation can be defined as fabricated news or information that is written to mislead readers or attract people's attention. So today, social media can be ideal ground for spreading misinformation due to lack of censorship. And there are numerous research done to tackle the issue of fake news. And one of the notable and relatable study was cross-language fake news detection, where the authors presented fake news detection model for both language, which is English and Chinese. So we have two research questions about the similarities and differences in the characteristics of fake news and the role of social media in spreading them. And our hypothesis was that authoritarian countries like China tends to be more controlling on social media than non-authoritarian countries like USA. So we chose two social media platforms, Twitter and Weibo, to represent USA and China respectively. And Twitter dataset was aggregation of two data from two studies, and Weibo dataset was from another published paper, which was the first Chinese dataset on COVID-19 misinformation.
Tweets that were labeled true tended to have larger values of interaction metrics such as retweet count and user follower count. True labeled tweets also tended to be longer in content by a couple of words on average. In addition, tweets with false labels were prone to be from an unknown source platform, and the user verification had low likelihood of being labeled fake.
Seems to be a problem. Maybe your slides are not advancing.
I think so.
What's noticeable is that fake news, unlike real news, has a significantly higher correlation between like number and repost number. Through this, we could see fake news methods of increasing the number of reposts and increasing the number of likes to spread them intentionally.
Yeah, I think the same problem's happening. Maybe these slides, this section of slides, you didn't set the timer on it, perhaps.
When implemented topic modeling with two different texts, Twitter tweets and Weibo posts, from the two plots on the slide, we can tell that a prime number of topics that can be detected from the text was much higher for Twitter than Weibo.
Yes, and I think they're messed up. You guys are already halfway through. Just manually click the rest of the way. Yeah.
We implemented a few machine learning classifier algorithms with vectorized text with TF-IDF. Through the comparison, we suggest that random forest classifier to be the most suitable, as there's no big difference between accuracy scores between two social media platforms. For random forest classifier, we obtain textual feature importance, which shows the most important tokens of words that helps the performance of classifier model. Looking at the top 10 important features for both Twitter and Weibo, there is not much of difference. This can be interpreted as that we can use the same classifier model in the future for both countries.
For sentiment classification, we add a sentiment column with positive and negative labels to divide real and fake news. Looking at both social media platforms, the number of positive labels or real news was higher than fake news. And for Weibo, the difference between positive and negative labels varied a lot compared to Twitter. After dividing the datasets into sentiments, we made word cloud for each group to visualize the difference between real and fake news. Interesting thing was that Weibo showed some differences, such as number of words and the words used in the text, but Twitter actually didn't show noticeable differences in the word cloud, except the fake news mentions the Trump word a lot. The two datasets were clustered using k-means and agglomerative clustering techniques. The SSE values in the datasets with k-means yield insight into the optimal number of clusters. In this case, ignoring post statistics and using only TF-IDF, vectorization yields lower SSE values and shows no preference to the number of clusters. K-means and agglomerative clustering with word complete, average, and single linkage were all performed with two clusters to use the real and fake labels as an external index. Looking at 4 different evaluation metrics for all clustering methods, K-means tend to have little higher accuracy, but was outperformed by average linkage agglomerative clustering with regard to F1 score. Ultimately, clustering on its own does not appear to provide enough and appropriate insight regarding our hypothesis. Both platforms do not show obvious cluster count with k-means and show low accuracy and F1 scores, with using k-means in each of the hierarchical clustering techniques, with values being improved overall by only considering each post as backward words.
Feature importance was first performed by finding the coefficients of a tree-based model. The feature importances of the Twitter dataset and the Weibo dataset were quite similar. However, rather than the structural components of the sentences, such as the verbs, nouns, and pronouns, relationship-based features such as the number of likes and number of comments a post received had higher values for their importances. Permutation feature importance was used as a different feature importance measure for comparison. The results showed no significant difference from the random forest feature importance method. However, the number of features with a relatively significant weighting for the Weibo dataset is lower than for the Twitter dataset. The similarity between the two datasets suggests that the features of fake news are indifferent of social media platform. As seen prior, the important features do not seem to change according to social media platform, whether it's from an authoritarian country or not. So it is possible to use similar models in detecting and preventing fake news across different languages. Another possible solution could be developing a web app or labeling system to detect fake news, as we cannot intervene with social media activity directly. These approaches are limited by the fact that there is only a small amount of publicly available social media data that is reliably labeled as true or false, especially for countries such as China. Another limitation is due to the specificity of the datasets. Both datasets were chosen to cover COVID-19. However, this limited scope makes it difficult to find a clear difference in sentiments with regards to truth detection. One improvement that could be utilized would be to apply a more robust language model that makes use of deep learning, as this would allow posts to be interpreted as more than simple bags of words. Another improvement that would expand the applicability of the fake news comparison would be to include more languages and to either use more accurate, possibly manual translations, or apply appropriate methods directly to the source languages.
All right, very good. Outside of the small technical hiccups, but those are going to happen obviously sometimes. So especially when you're all on Zoom. So very good. So does anybody have any questions? Because I definitely have a couple questions. But does anybody else have questions other than me just asking you guys questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if you want and just ask a question. All right. Well, I will ask a question. Now, one thing that caught my attention, William and Andrea and the rest of your group, was you mentioned this at the end, actually. You were talking about the language differences. How did you deal with, Chinese is a very different language than English, is written differently. And I assume that in Weibo, people are writing in Chinese. Like, how did you deal with that issue when you were analyzing like the data, or was it already dealt with for you, like in the data set you had?
So when we looked at the literature review, most of the Chinese data set used Google Translators. So, but when we actually worked with Google Translator, it did work fine. So we used.
It did work fine? Like the
Yeah.
translations? I understand. Yes, I mean, it's like, obviously I live in Korea, like Google Translate sucks for Korean, that's why you have Papago. So I'm curious. I was curious, like when you translate Chinese into English, I was just curious, like how accurate it was. Yeah, I'd be curious if like you mentioned using manual translations. I wonder if that would produce any different results possibly, but that's obviously outside the scope of this project. But okay, very good. Yeah, I was curious about that. The language difference is always going to be a challenge with that. Interesting. So those results are actually a little bit surprising, but cool, nonetheless cool. All right, very good job. So I'll clap for you guys. Nice job. So then let's move along to group 4. If you guys want to share your slides, and then whenever you are ready, you can start.
Okay.
We actually have 2 groups doing the same project topic, so it's a bit of a competition. We'll see who does better. So, no pressure.
Okay, let me start.
Okay.
Okay, we're group 4, and our topic is mitigating disruptions in the global supply chain. Group members are Julissa, Esther, Nawa, and me, Byung-ho. The global supply chain is susceptible to various disruptions, including pandemics, economic recession. Such disruptions can affect demand, supply, and distribution across different industries. We conduct an analysis of the causes and effects of past disruptions and forecast demand and supply for pivotal industries during potential disruptions. To achieve our project goal, we obtained industry data sets from the public database, TradeMap. We selected 4 data sets representing industries that either benefit or suffered due to previous disruptions. We used the 16 data sets previously mentioned and implemented 4 analysis methods here. These methods help us understand the patterns in the data during the occurrence of an interruption. To begin, we divided the data into 4 periods to avoid the potential confusion from overlapping patterns. It's known as Simpson's paradox. We identified common data patterns across these periods during past disruption events. We used the moving average to inspect the trend for each data set. Looking at the graphs of fossil fuels and semiconductors, we had identified turning points during period 2, 3, and 4, but not in period 1. Unlike the previous situation, the graph for tourism showed a consistent rise until a sharp decline in 2020, while pharmaceuticals displayed an upward trend. We also calculate the rate of change between the max and mean values for each period across these data sets. As anticipated, the fluctuations in both phosphorus and semiconductors exhibited similar patterns. We conducted a clustering analysis and it
measures the similarity between two temporal sequences, which may vary in speed or timing. In our approach, we treat each data within each period as an individual object for the application of the clustering method. We experimented with different numbers of clusters and compared the results. We observed the tendency for semiconductor and pulse field data to be allocated to the same cluster. And we also tried Granger causality to see if one time series could effectively forecast another one. This method is crucial because it helps us understand the relationships and influence between different data sets. As we examine our results, the past value of Korean pharmaceutical exports proved to be valuable in predicting the future values of various target variables. So finally, through the application of various analysis methods, we have extracted common patterns occurring before and after disruption situations. We have compiled these observations into a comprehensive pattern list.
During our research, we have developed certain models such as ARIMA, SARIMA, and machine learning ensemble models and deep learning models, and also Profit, which we use to forecast the models. And also using these models, it is better for us to make well-informed decisions and effectively navigate through future disruptions.
You'll know there seems to be the same problem we had with the last group, is slides not advancing here.
Yeah, so we had four industries: semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, tourism, and fuel, out of which we only had to use three, because for the tourism we didn't have much data, and for those data sets we also added economic indicators. And after evaluating our models, the best model that we had was by machine learning based ensemble model, then LSTM, transformer models, profit model, and traditional time series models. For the best model, which is machine learning ensemble models, the patterns that we got were, if you take a closer look for the semiconductors and fuel, if there's an increase in the semiconductors in the graph, there's also an increase in the fuel, which is an interesting connection. And also we cross-referenced using volatility analysis and clustering analysis that there's some relation between the semiconductor industry and fuel industry. And also the past values of the Korean pharmaceutical exports provides valuable information in predicting future values for various other data sets. We present our analysis and modeling results through an interactive dashboard. It's a user-friendly platform which allows user to access real-time import-export data graphs for each industry. In this, we have created a dashboard by using HTML and CSS. The user can select the data set that it wants to and insert the start time, month, and end time and end month, and when it can just click forecast, and it will forecast for the next 6 months. During our project, the problems that we faced were finding the data sets that were required, and even if we found the data set, they were not it had limited number of data samples. For future work, we believe that beyond Korea and United States, we can also work for different countries, and we can also focus on more than 4 industries. Thank you.
Very good. Nice job, guys. I'll clap for you, even if nobody else does. Does anybody else have questions for them other than me asking questions? Anybody, feel free to unmute yourself if you want. I see Yan.
I do have one question for the group. I wanted to understand like how we were using the causal model outputs in this. So
Sorry.
What?
the profit model, you guys developed a profit model, right? I wanted to understand how we are using those results.
Yeah, so in the data set, we had two columns, like the date and the amount value. We call the profit function, and then we give it, and we ask it like specify these are the two columns that we have, and it predicts. It was pretty simple to do it, but we had to we compared the profit results with other results to it. They were similar, but using ML ensemble model, like the prediction that it did were better than the profit model.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Interesting. I have one question. Could you explain those clustering results that you showed back on like slide 12 or something? Yeah, like the 11, slide 11 right there. And what is this? Because I didn't quite understand all this. What is this showing?
Actually, we tried dynamic time warping. This is a clustering algorithm for time series data. So, like, since we have for industry data, and we also have for periods, how can I say, we just I tried to make 3 clusters and 4 clusters and 5 clusters. So when I set n as 3, like the first cluster has, as you can see here, semi-US export period 2 and semi-US import period 2.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. It's okay.
When I set n as 4, like actually it should be good to see all the cluster results, but the space is not enough. So we just show only 1 cluster here and 2 and 3 clusters.
Okay.
So as you can see here, period 2, 3, and 4 semiconductor and phosphor data have a similar patterns. And here period 1 data is also how can I say assigned to the same cluster, which meaning their pattern might be similar.
Yeah. Okay, I understand now. Yeah. So these are just example clusters, not all the clusters.
Yeah.
You guys, Nawaz mentioned this too. Do you guys have any idea why the semiconductors and the fuel have some weird connection? Do you have any theories about that?
Actually, looking at the trend graph, there are some turning points, pair 2, 3, and 4. And for semiconductor graphs, it also has some turning points here. So we assume that in pair 2, we had the 2008 global economic recession, and 2016 we had Brexit, and 2020 we had COVID-19. So, so we assume that fossil fuels and semiconductors are gas affected due to global disruption situations. But for tourism and pharmaceuticals graph, there's not really turning points in the graph. So we assume that those tourism and pharmaceuticals are not really affected by disruption situations.
Okay. That's interesting. I mean, we gotta move on to the next group, but it's interesting. The fossil fuels and semiconductors have some sort of weird connection in terms of global supply chain disruptions. Interesting. All right, well, very good. Good job. I'll clap for you guys, even if nobody does. So good job. So why don't we move along to group 5? 2 more groups and we'll be done. So
Okay. So hello everyone. We are group 5, consists of Ronald Lee, Kushal, Jimin, Single. Today, we are going to present our solution for the providing targeted responsible foreign aid to the audiences. Those are the contents of our presentation today. From project background to the final result, we all are going to explain what we have done. So at first, I want to tell you why foreign aid is needed. As all of you knew, South Korea suffered Korean War. After that, South Korea was one of the poorest country. But by lots of aid given by USA, Korea was able to make astonishing economic development. And now it's the one of the strong alliance of USA. But even with those kind of aid given to the other countries, most of them wasn't able to make economic development like South Korea, and skeptical point of view has arisen. By this, we want to present what will be providing targeted responsible foreign aid. While modeling, we are inspired by 2 words, targeted, responsible. For targeted, we will filter out the countries which will has an actual positive effect. For responsible, we will find out how the aid should be given. There are various types of foreign aid exist. Out of those types, we will focus on economic type of foreign aid, which has lots of numerical indicators of data, which lead to the impact on GDP per capita. This is our model overview. From those data sets, our final goal is to provide information of targeted, responsible foreign aid to the US Embassy.
There are a source of data sets. We use datasets from World Bank data, OECD data, and Corruption Perception Index, and other text data for text analysis. We make total work development indicator index for one data frame for supervised learning, and use text data for unsupervised learning.
yeah, it seems to be the same problem with last group. So we have to manually click here.
For analysis, we use 34 countries, 24 in Latin America, and 10 in Southeast Asia. Also, there were first 1400 indicators. In left chart, there were so many null values in feature, so we only use features that doesn't contain null value and drop highly correlated features. For analysis, we use 21 features. Also, we made a flow for the seed, the trends and actual values of foreign aid and GDP in Latin America and Southeast Asia. As average aid increases, GDP is also increased. So we can conclude there is correlation between GDP and foreign aid. Also, this is the trend of GDP and foreign aid with both regions. As we can see, only historical data is considered for budgeting next year. So our hypothesis is we can use previous data with indicators and foreign aid and build predictive modeling for budgeting next year. As for the modeling side, we have decided to go ahead with regression model, which will try to predict the GDP per capita. That's a in US dollars, and we'll use the rest of the world indicators as part of the explanatory variables that are like one way or another impacting the economic development of the countries, along with foreign aid as a controllable variable. For the baseline model, we will use the linear regression model that is a test for identifying if we can somehow function the world indicators with a combination of foreign aid to predict the GDP results. As you can see, the result shows it's a significance. It's significant to model this relationship, and we can try with different versions. After trying multiple iterations, we have decided to go ahead with the random forest model, which kind of has lowest RMSE. So our predictions will be off by $1,000, and it comes with a it comes with like a positive side that it's very good in interpreting the results. As for the drawbacks of this model, the model shows like an increase in error rate over time. And on the right side, you are seeing the results on different set of clusters. The clusters are created using the GDP and the corruption perception index. And you can see only the cluster number 2 has a lot of has a lowest RMSE. So we'll focus on that cluster. As part of interpretability, we will use SHAP values for understanding how the predictions are being derived by each feature. So you can see there are 2 instances from the data which are driving the predictions from base value. As for the next overall summary of the interpretation, we see that the GDP will increase with the highest ratio of working population. Those are the top 2 variables on the left chart. On the right chart as well, we can see the foreign aid being manipulated by the age dependency ratio. That's the working percent population. Also, there is additional thing that agriculture production also influences that. And as part of the text analysis, we are using the activities column, which I'm assuming is activities carried out by providing the foreign aid. And this kind of divides all of the activities into 6 different groups. Those are basically based on what type of words are associated in the activities text.
For this slide here, this is a biogram word cloud of both Southeast Asia and North America, which provides a visual representation of the text data within the activity column. Then here we have a dashboard developed in Power BI. It's parameterized where a user puts in a year and then a given country, where it actually generates all the supporting information. Then for the future work, we intend to involve the US Embassy for domain knowledge to better understand the practices. And also we tend to come up with a SurveyMonkey questionnaire where the different users at the embassy can review the model. Then we plan to continue with the topic modeling, which includes basically how the US Embassy will create policies for different countries.
All right, very good. Thank you, guys. So I'll clap for you. Nobody else does. Does anybody have any questions for them? I definitely have 1 or 2 questions I can ask. Does anybody else have any questions they're curious about foreign aid? Anybody interested in foreign aid? Okay, well, I'll ask a question then. So, one question I had a few questions, but I'll just ask one in the interest of time. You guys showed like on slide 19 there, and then there was an earlier slide back after you had done the SHAP values. There's a couple of these where you're kind of talking about the different features. Yeah, like so both this one and the word cloud you showed, were there particular features that you found in the various kinds of analysis you looked at that were like related to whether foreign aid was effective or not? Was there like kept mentioning there were like 2 or 3 things?
Yes, so for the interpretability part, we are only focusing on what are the features we have used for modeling purpose. But on the text analytics side, we are solely relying on the data given by the World Bank. And that is an open source data. We are not sure the how the data was collected, the data collection process over there, what kind of information it has. So we kind of narrowed it down to basically understand what actually happens within the activities on providing the foreign aid. So each country will have like a set of activities carried out. It varies across government institutions, enterprises, and other NGOs where the money is forwarded to the developing countries, and that is where we try to understand if there is any difference between two of these regions. On the left, you can see few of the fields which are talking about the transparency and the accordance expectations. As for now, we don't have the exact understanding of how the entire process works, and for now, we can only focus on the terms which are related. That is the transparency. So basically, there is an issue with what kind of what kind of information we have about the money about the foreign aid that is dispersed to these countries. And on the right, we see a lot of things about the narcotics and law, which are basically driven towards the security in Latin America region.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I noticed on the one, the narcotics makes sense. Obviously, transparency makes sense. If we don't know what people are doing with the money, then
Yeah.
who knows what the hell they're doing with the money? And then the narcotics obviously is a problem because probably a lot of the funds are getting diverted. I was interested too in the other graph. You like the age and migration were up at the top of the list.
Yeah.
I was curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if that's outflow migration or inflow migration.
The net migration, I'm guessing it's the outflow migration from the developing countries, because there is a section within foreign aid which kind of is associated towards the migration, which helps people in migrate to the developed countries so that there's fair trade between the foreign aid and the workforce.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, good. Well, in the interest of time, we'll move along, but I thought that was pretty interesting, some of your stuff. I know, Ron, you were gonna say something, but I assume hopefully he covered whatever you were gonna add there.
Yes, sorry. Thanks.
Yeah,
I think I'm done.
yeah, yeah. All right, well, let's move on to the last group then, because we're already at 10 o'clock. So, you guys, group 6, you guys want to take over here? And you can start whenever you're ready.
Hello. Okay. I'll start. Hello everyone. We're Caroline Haythorne, Sna Sadish, Hanok Kim, and Yeon Jun in Group 6. We're students from Indiana University and Hanyang University. The topic of our project is vaccine distribution optimization, preparing for the next pandemic. The given topic for our group was mitigating disruptions in the global supply chain caused by the continued COVID-19 pandemic. Many trade experts said that the fastest way to mitigate disruptions is to recover from COVID-19 situation as best as possible. And we thought that the best way is to do so is to optimize vaccine distribution. Also, we thought that many countries have already recovered from COVID-19 situation, so we chose our project topic as how can we optimize vaccine distribution if another pandemic happens. In COVID-19 situation, richer nations focused on rolling out vaccines to their own populations, so vaccination rates were low in African countries. Unequal distribution led to emergence of Omicron variant and many other diseases. So we should think about equal vaccine distribution for future pandemic.
For data collection, we basically use 4 data: population, vaccine manufacturer, country relationship, and trade data. In the case of vaccine manufacturer data, there was too many empty data to analyze, so Kaggle data was also improved and combined. Also, we merged the data to see trade and country-by-country relationship.
Here is the EDA for the census data of 2022. The bar graphs over here are just basically the vaccination details, like the total doses and the ones which are vaccinated with at least one dose, the ones which are fully vaccinated, and the booster. And on the top right, there is just a heat map of the overview of the population country-wise, where the darker color represents a more populated country.
For the vaccine data EDA, we use manufacturer data to see which country the most development and manufacturing. As we can see, the United States development and manufactured the most, and it was found that developing country also produce a lot of vaccine. After that, we knew that the vaccine was with the most vaccine production and inoculation rate was AstraZeneca. Vaccine developer based in high-income country has primarily selected manufacturing partner also based in high-income country. In contrast, vaccine developer from middle-income countries such as China, Cuba, India, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Vietnam has primarily select manufacturing partner based in middle-income country. There are no arrangement in our data set which manufactured based in low-income countries.
The next piece we had to use was looking at country distances. We wanted to understand, we wanted to allow countries that are closer together to be more likely to share vaccines with each other. So we were able to use a data set that was already available to identify how far countries are from each other. Here you can see for the US, Indonesia, Australia, and Singapore are the farthest countries. And for Korea, Uruguay, Argentina, and Chile are the farthest countries. We did this for all of every single country though, not just the US and Korea. Then we looked at trade data. This was available through the World Trade Organization. We focused primarily on exports, looking at what portion of exports go to different countries. So here you can see in the US, most of the exports go to China, the European Union, Mexico, and Canada. And for Korea, most of the exports go to China, the USA, the European Union, and Japan. The data set also contains import data as well, which you'll see later on.
This is our updated design sketch where we collected the census, vaccine supply, distance, along with the trade data, merged them and found out which countries are in surplus and deficits of vaccines. And also we identified the country allies and the distance between the country pairs. And finally, we optimized where the allies can send vaccinations and visualize it all using a Tableau dashboard.
In order to clean the data set, the first thing we had to do was merge all the data together. We utilized the standard 3-letter country codes in order to be able to compare countries from different data sets easily. There was also some missing data in our data sets. In order to address this, we just assumed the worst case scenario. So if it was missing from the vaccine data set, we assumed they had no vaccines. And if it was missing from the trade data set, we assumed they weren't trading with the other countries. We normalized the country distance and trade data so that we could get rankings more easily and use the same units for each other, or use the same units between the two different types of data. And we calculated the vaccine surplus or deficit by combining the census data with the vaccine supply data. In order to get the country ally score, we looked at trade and proximity. The trade indicator is the portion of the supplier's exports which go to the receiver country, plus the portion of the receiver's imports which come from the supplier country. So this allows us to prioritize countries that specialize in importing and exporting with each other. If they already have a partnership, they're more likely to be selected. And we utilize both the exports and the imports to account for different economy sizes. So if you have a small country that's importing from one country primarily, that will boost their score, the likelihood that they'll share vaccines with each other. And the distance indicator was just the difference between the two countries. In order to optimize the vaccine distribution, we looked at for each country with a vaccine deficit, first you identify the viable supply countries, and they must be able to supply all vaccines to totally fill the gap. Of the viable supply partners, we identified the country pair with the highest score based on the previous slide. We subtracted the vaccine deficit from the supply country's surplus. And then we shuffled the remaining surplus countries. We found in earlier testing, the countries that were closer to the end of the data set were more likely to be selected. So Zimbabwe was really being generous with their supply vaccines. Instead, we shuffled it just to remove that. And then we iterated until all countries with deficits had a partner selected.
Great. You guys are already over time, so you need to wrap this up in the next 60 seconds.
Okay.
This is our dashboard where this is the ideal country pairs, which was the main output of our algorithm. And then these are the trade scores, where the one on top is the receiver and the one at the bottom is the supplier. And this is the total number of vaccines that were there in all of the countries. And then this basically shows how many countries were in surplus or deficit, and there's a small graph on the right as well. And in conclusion, due to the unequal distribution of vaccines, the pandemic was prolonged and a lot of lives were lost. And the optimization algorithm that we use can make comparatively easy decisions. And the combination of trade and distance data can result in efficient shipment of vaccines. And with the help of this fine-tuned model, we could be ready for future pandemics.
Also, when building the algorithm, there are some features that we could not consider. And also, when we built the algorithm, we used the current data, so because the vaccine shortages are not prevalent.
In the future, we'd like to add more complexity to adjust for vaccine shortages, prioritize countries with more at-risk populations, and use more about the manufacturing data to predict supplies. We can also use weighted graphs to address partial deficits instead of the full partnership, and utilize it to strengthen suggestions about where policymakers should suggest trade ties based on like shortages in trade.
Okay. All right. I assume that's the end of it. So thank you guys very much, and claps for everybody all around. One question I have is, if you go back to the graph, I'll ask a quick question here. We go back to graph 17, 18. This is what I'm curious about this. So these mean, I think it was 18, graph 18 maybe. So this means the ones that are darker have a deficit, or they have a surplus?
The darker ones have the surplus, and then the light ones have the
Yeah.
deficit. Yeah.
Interesting. China has such a huge surplus.
Yeah. The data came from the end of this pandemic, so like the vaccine supply is high. I think in the future we'd also want to model with sample data to generate what it would look like with shortages.
Yeah. All right, very cool. I see Haiju's on here, Dr. Tong. He says, good job, everybody. So, okay, well, very good, nice. So you guys can stop sharing your slides there. So good job, everybody. I think you guys did a really nice job. And figure out how to close this chat window here without closing everything down. I have no idea how to do this. Anyway, very good job, everybody. I think everybody did a really nice job. You know, like I said, we'll wrap up this recording here and share these with the embassy. But everybody, nice round of applause. Everybody, clap for yourselves. All right, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna try to figure out how to stop.